this morning for Daily Focus and trying an outdoor venue. And I hope that the sound is better than the echoey that it was yesterday. We don't have all of the fancy equipment since we're traveling that we usually do, but we're glad to still be able to share with you God's Word and to give you some fuel to life and some principles to apply as we continue to look at this path of wisdom. Yesterday we looked at some great advice from Dad, and David basically reminded Solomon, you got to grow up and be a man. I'm not going to be here. You're going to have to deal with some things, and he talked about dealing with that which is wrong or evil, and then rewarding and blessing that, and providing for those that have done good. And it just reminds me of our political debacle in which we find our country today, and so much corruption. Even the Flynn situation, and General Flynn's now exonerated because of just deep corruption that is being exposed. And you know, I almost feel like taking our politicians and saying, you know what David's advice was? If they've done corruption at this level, they must pay a price. Otherwise, what will happen is they'll feel like this is okay, and future generations will feel like this is okay. And what we've seen in this level of corruption may be a whole different level of corruption down the road if there's not a price tag. And I think that's what David was telling Solomon is, you know, in parenting, you want to give them correction and deal with their character when they're little and young, because if you let it go, what that character or lack of character looks like when they get older is so much more severe and so much more difficult and so much more damaging. And so David told Solomon, listen, there are some people you're going to have to deal with, or this is going to get really ugly in your kingdom. And then there are some people you really need to reward. There are some that you really need to care for. And it's because of their generosity, because of their kindness, because of their support and loyalty to the plan of God. And so there was just a lot that went into yesterday in good advice from a dad. Well, today we want to look again at that path of wisdom. He says in verse number 11, I have taught thee in the way of wisdom. I have led thee in the right paths. Verse 14 says, enter not into the path of the wicked, and go not in the way of the evil men. Avoid it, pass not by it, turn from it, and pass away. For they sleep not except they have done mischief, and their sleep is taken away unless they cause some to fall. Isn't it sad that there are some people who lie awake at night, devising selfish, mischievous paths to get away with something, to stir up trouble, to get something? And that's what he's talking about there. He says, you know, there are individuals who are willing to lay awake and chart an evil path than to get some rest at night. He says, for they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence, but the path of the just is as shining light, that shineth more and more unto a perfect day. The way of the wicked is as darkness, they know not at what they stumble. My son, attend to my words, incline thine ear unto my sayings. Let them not depart from thine eyes, keep them in the midst of thine heart. For they are life unto those that find them, and health to all their flesh. Keep thy heart with all diligence. That word keep means to guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Put away from thee a froward mouth, and perverse lips put far from thee. Let not thine eyes look right on. Let thine eyes look right on, and let thine eyelids look straight before thee. Ponder the path of thy feet, and let all thy ways be established. Turn not to the right hand, nor to the left. Remove thy foot from evil. So as we contemplate some thoughts today, there are some things that God teaches us here about the path of wisdom. The path of wisdom is a bright path. It is a path of life. It is a path of health. It is a path of holiness. And there's no guilt. We've talked about that. So he warns about, don't even take one step to the path of wickedness. Don't give yourself any tolerance at all to go a different way, to follow a different path. It's tempting. He says there are really 4 things that we have to guard against. And he says, do not follow the path of sin. I don't know what it is that you struggle with. I don't know maybe what sin it is that you're currently struggling with, involved in, protecting, justifying, whatever the case may be. I do know that we all have feet of clay, and we all struggle, and we all have a sin that does so easily beset us. And so it's just a time in our devotions for us to just be really honest with ourselves and really honest with God, and to say, am I getting off path? Is there a sin for which I'm willing to protect? Is there a sin that I'm willing to promote? Am I really justifying something that I know God's word says don't do? Or am I being lazy regarding something God's word clearly commands to do, and I'm just not doing it? I just don't make time for it. Maybe I don't like it. Maybe I don't want to have to do it. Whatever the case may be, but I know, as I stand before God this morning, that I'm not walking the path of wisdom. I'm making an allowance for the path of sin. The second thing that he alludes to is the path of selfishness. You say, well, Pastor, they're the same thing. Well, technically they are, but selfishness is specifically those arenas of my life where I just want to please me. It might be that I'm willing to justify anger. You know, God says anger is a terrible thing. He says, don't make friends with an angry man. In other words, he says, listen, anger can be a terribly divisive thing. It can be a terribly destructive thing. And he warns us in Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 26 to let not the sun go down upon our wrath. He said, now listen, don't you go to bed angry. You make sure you clean your heart and have a pure heart, because in the morning you're going to be more angry. And the very next verse, verse 27, says, where it says, I can't remember exactly, neither give place to the devil, which is exactly the phrase that we put the devil in a position where only he can win. And so he says anger is a really easy way to put the devil in a place where he can win. It's literally giving place to the devil. And God says, listen, if you're angry, don't go down that path. Deal with it right here on this path and follow the path of wisdom. Don't step off to the right. Don't step off to the left. Make your eyelids straight on, because this is a dangerous path. It might be that you're entertaining anger, but it might be that you're entertaining laziness. It might be that you're entertaining lust. It might be that you're entertaining a divisive spirit about something, a critical spirit. He gives specific things, as he says we need to guard our heart regarding. And he says, put away from thee a froward mouth, and perverse lips put far from thee. That's that critical spirit, that complaining spirit, that gossiping tongue, that tail-biting tongue, those types of things, a tail-bearing tongue. These are the things that God says, you know what, you got to put away. Don't take one step. When you start out, you better deal with it. That's what wisdom says. And so these are the paths of selfishness, where we begin to cater to specifically something that we want. But then he says, you know what, don't go down the path of sensuality. We live in the day today where sensuality is all around us. We live in a culture where our society has actually been conditioned to accept it, even if people don't agree with it. They go, it's just the way things are. Well, God says it's not the way things should be. And so therefore, don't take one step. Don't watch one show. Don't listen to one bit of music that leads you down the path of sensuality. Don't listen to one joke. Don't entertain one thought. Don't go down that path, because it only takes one step, and now you're headed down a path. And that's how the devil gets you. It's just one step after another. He can't get you from the path of wisdom to destruction, he won't take that step, but he'll get you to take the first step on that path, and then he'll get you to march down that path. So God is just teaching us, you know what? You're going to have to guard your heart. Guard your heart against sin. Guard your heart against selfishness. Guard your heart against sensuality. And then he says, guard your heart against senselessness. It's just being mindless, not thinking things through, not being careful to evaluate, being honest about things, just going with the flow, or having the simple approach to, it'll all work out. Whatever the case may be, God says, listen, there is a path that is right, and it's going to require some work. You're going to have to guard your heart against these things. You're going to have to guard your heart against sin, guard your heart against selfishness, guard your heart against sensuality, guard your heart against senselessness. But there's a path that is bright. There is a path that is wonderful. And it's the path that God lays out in wisdom. And so here we once again, in the book of Proverbs, are faced with a choice. Are we going to stay the path of wisdom and follow the character of Christ, or are we going to get distracted with the things of this world? God says, listen, it's worth it. Ponder your steps. Look at where you're going, and let God direct you through wisdom so that he can be glorified with your life. I trust you'll have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow from North Carolina as we once again have our daily focus at 9 o'clock. God bless you today.